Hi there, welcome back. Alright, so far in this course, we've learned how to define a company mission, values, and vision. And in the last module, we learned how to define breakthrough objectives. Now again, in our treetop example, we saw them only choose one breakthrough since this is their first attempt at Hoshin planning. You may decide to go ahead and define 2 to 3 breakthrough objectives. Now in this module, we're going to continue the Hoshin journey as we learn about setting annual objectives and plans which are focused on the breakthrough objectives defined in the previous step. Well, specifically by the end of this module, you'll know how to use the A3 document to define annual objectives while also learning how to track the progress of these objectives. Now, before we get started, I do want to point out that the Hoshin planning horizon can vary. Now in Treetop's case, their first breakthrough objective had a time horizon of around 1 year. Now, some organizations may choose an objective with a longer time horizon of something like 2 to 3 years, especially if the breakthrough involves major projects like new infrastructure. Along these lines, while this step is referred to as setting annual objectives, it is okay if the objectives are slightly shorter or longer in duration. In the end, the power of Hoshin planning comes when organizations use the process to stay laser focused on continuous improvement no matter the time duration. Okay, well, in order to define the annual objectives, which is the focus of this module, we'd like to introduce a powerful tool known as the A3 document. Now, the A3 gets its name from the A3 size of paper it's printed on. Now within the A3, we first document the background and target condition. We then begin to really turn the PDCA wheel while working with our team to identify root causes. To be sure, this could take several weeks or longer. In other words, we'll very rarely ever be able to sit down in a room and complete an A3 in one sitting. Now once the root causes have been identified, we move our focus to laying out the improvement plan, which is shown in the top right. Finally, the lower section is used to identify how we're going to follow up on these objectives. Now, as we just mentioned, one of the key aspects of the Hoshin planning process is how reliant it is on the PDCA process. In fact, we see here the entire Hoshin planning process is nothing more than continuous PDCA cycles. For example, developing the vision, mission, and the values required close teamwork and collaborative PDCA cooperation, just like steps 2 through 7 do. Likewise, we use PDCA to work through the A3 process. Now, if you'd like a thorough review of the PDCA process, please refer to our practical problem solving course. Alright, well, let's have a look at how the Treetop team went about the A3 process for their breakthrough objective focused on increasing the productivity of their assembly department. Now, here's what their A3 looked like after several weeks of work. Now, as a side note, we'd really encourage you to view this module in full screen mode. To do this, just click the little icon in the lower right-hand corner of the video player. Now, keep in mind that this isn't necessarily how your A3 will look, since every A3 will be unique for your particular problem. Alright, well, let's see how the Treetop team worked their way around this particular A3 one section at a time. Well, first the team noted the objective at the top of the A3. They then took some time to describe the current state. In this example, we see that Treetop has experienced tremendous sales growth. We also learned that their assembly department has been identified as a bottleneck, which is why it was focused on during the breakthrough objective definition step. The next step in the A3 process saw the Treetop team provide some background and supporting data to better define the problem. To start, the team noted that their cycle time for the assembly process was now greater than takt time, as shown in a graph in the lower right-hand section. Next, the team noted that their assemblers were not meeting standards due to poor quality. Again, they shared a graph that shows their actual performance versus the target. Next, while the Treetop team has worked hard to organize work cells in the assembly department, they recognize that material is not flowing as smoothly as it should. And finally, they noted that the assembly team is frustrated due to end-of-the-month spikes, which is even more difficult to deal with since several new associates have been brought on. Now, as we continue to work around the A3, we now see how the treetop team defined their target condition, which, in this case, is to increase the assembly productivity by 45%. And to add even more clarity to the objective, the treetop team noted that the objective is meant to address both the cycle time and takt time issues while also addressing the other inefficiencies they're faced with. And to make it clear that the team is not looking to simply add more resources or work longer, they close this section by stating their goal is to essentially produce close to 50% more units with the same resources. Now, up to this point, the treetop team has spent a few days on their A3. The next step, however, took more than a week to complete as they worked to define root causes. To do this, the team used many of the same tools and principles we learned about in the practical problem solving course. For example, the team did several 5 why evaluations in addition to completing a fishbone diagram. Now, the end result of this process resulted in several root causes being identified, including things such as the fact that their computer-based production planning system is creating scheduling problems. Additionally, during their value stream mapping process, the treetop team had created work cells in their assembly department, but after some reflection and careful analysis, they realized that there's still a lack of true one-piece flow. Other root causes included a poor onboarding system, inadequate standard work, the sawing department is producing bad parts, a new lower-cost supplier is sending warped boards, no production boards displaying hourly results, and inadequate equipment and workbenches. Okay, well, at this point, the team felt as if they had learned a lot and identified several root causes worthy of attention. They did, however, keep in mind that the A3 process is dynamic and that additional root causes could be uncovered. And if and when they are, the A3 will be updated. In other words, the A3 document is most definitely not a static, never-changing document. Now, with this said, the next step in the process was for the treetop team to create an action plan. Now, here we see 5 major initiatives. The first initiative is called Transition Assembly to One-Piece Flow. And as we see, there are several sub-actions, including training of the associates and conducting time studies. Next to each action, we see when they expect to complete each of these items, followed by who is responsible for the action. Finally, the far right column will be used to monitor the status of each action. Now, it's blank now, since this is what the A3 looked like at its initial phase. We'll see what this section looks like after a few months in future modules. And last, but certainly not least, the treetop team documented how they plan to check the results, which, when applicable, will result in turning the PDCA cycle again to adjust the process. For example, the first action of working to improve the flow and output of the assembly line will be checked by verifying the pieces per hour and calculating the net profit per assembler. The exact process for how this will be done is documented in their Standard Operating Procedure 1412 document. Now, we also see that the supervisor will be responsible for this and will do the check weekly. Now, the most important thing to remember about the A3 process is that its power comes from the thinking involved during the creation process. Additionally, as we mentioned earlier, the A3 process is very dynamic in nature. Now, the document should evolve and change as the team learns new things and completes tasks. Now, another important aspect of the A3 process is the parent A3 to child A3 concept. Now, what we just saw completed could be called a top level or parent A3. Now, the individual actions on this parent A3 can and should be broken down into what are called child A3s. These A3s follow the same exact format and process, only they drill down into more detail for that particular objective. For example, Treetop's action of transitioning assembly to one-piece flow will indeed need its own A3 in order for that action to succeed. Additionally, A3s can also be deployed from the top to bottom of the organization, as we see here. In this case, the CEO's actions become the targets of senior managers, and the process continues the same way throughout the organization. And once an organization has their parent and child A3s complete, they can be posted in a war room as shown in this example, providing an easy way to monitor the progress and performance of these important initiatives. Alright, well, that wraps up this module. In our next lesson, we're going to move on to the next step of the Hoshin planning, which has us deploy these improvement plans throughout the organization through a process known as catch-ball. So, we'll speak to you soon.